We have talked a lot about velomobiles today, and well, I'm in the business of helping people find velomobiles, and I want to talk about how to choose one. And choosing a velomobile is an interesting process. I talk to people all the time about it. In fact, pretty much every day, when somebody calls and asks about it. But what's interesting is when we start getting into how they want to use the bike, and that's the comes to the number one question people ask, which is, what velomobile is best for me? And what I always respond with is, well, what are you going to do with it? And that usually segues into a conversation about golf clubs where I say, look, they're all can hit the ball down the fairway, but some are better at pitching, some are better at wedge, at driving, some are better at other things. And then it goes off into other conversations. First thing, though, I want to characterize this is they are all fast. They are all faster than the trikes and bikes you're riding today. They are all within a very narrow window of each other when it comes to speed testing and things like that. So getting one isn't going to be necessarily a little better or a little worse in some areas, but not a lot in any given area. We're going to kind of go through that for a second. But my point behind all that is, what are you going to use it for? Are you going to go fast? Are you going to tour? Are you going to replace a car? Get out of the weather? Those are the kind of things people talk to me all the time about wanting to do velomobiles. And all velomobiles will do that. They'll all go fast. They'll all be tourable. They'll all replace a car if you want to. And they all have some level, if not total, weather protection. So I kind of developed a little scale, and I'm sure Joseph is going to come in and talk about what his thoughts are. But I think my scale is pretty accurate for the kind of stuff that I've been doing for years with velomobiles, and it gives you an idea of kind of how I rank them when I talk to people. And more importantly, when you look at this scale, I kind of as a 1 to 10, 1 being not so good, 10 being as good. There's only 1 10 on every one of these pages that I'm going to talk about. And there's usually no ones, but there are some lower numbers, and I'll kind of go in and describe them and why, in my particular opinion, I picked them. So let's start out with the carrying capacity. And then the carrying capacity, we started with the different velomobiles. We have a Quest, a Strata, and a Mango. These are all fairly similar in the same age group. These were all kind of built, some of the first versions of velomobiles. They all carry stuff. I carried a lot of stuff in my Mango for a while. I've carried stuff in the Quest, but they really don't have the cargo capacity in their designs that the today's do. So the DF and the DFXL, the Wall, and of course the Quattrevelo, which I've ranked number 10 here, it's really the best. It has the best. In fact, we'll talk about it in a second. There's some really, what I would say, over the top testing that's been done on the Quattrevelo. Milans are there. The Alpha 7 is lower, mainly because, at least in my Alpha 7, the exchange line's kind of exposed. The back swing arm is exposed. Not a lot of carrying capacity, but it's not really made to. Those are more speed machines. The Mulsanne is really difficult to carry stuff in, and the Snook that I tested, it's small, tight, and when you have somebody my size in it, there's not much room for the luggage in there. And then, of course, for the M9 and the W9, we don't know that much about yet, but hopefully we'll be able to see them soon. When I said earlier, the earlier capacity on this is somebody figured out we could put 26 packs in a Quattrevelo. There's a video out on YouTube about it. It's hysterical. And look, they're not just any 6-pack. They're European six packs, not American 6-packs. So they're the real deal. That's a lot of cargo capacity in a Quattrevelo. In fact, Quattrovelos, you can put an optional child seat in it. I carried my daughter around for years in the back of the Quattrevelo until she outgrew the thing, and then I carried other stuff, but I've not yet put 26 packs in, but it's coming. Stability, going through corners, going through turns, going through things. And so a lot of times you get to, on your velomobile, you're going to go fast. You're going to corner hard. Some of in fact, all but one of the Quattrevelo are 3-wheeled machines. So a Quest, they're pretty tippy. I've picked them up on 2 wheels multiple times. People have rolled them. Same thing with Strata and the Mango. The center of gravity is a little lower. The DF and DFXL, kind of honestly, I picked my DF up going through corners hard a lot. but the thing is so stable, I can handle it through the corners. I wouldn't recommend you doing this your first day, but as you get used to it, you can do that. WAs have a really low center of gravity, again, like the Mangos did, and the Stratas. So those are harder to tip over. They've also got a little bit more camber. The wheels are out a little bit more like this, and they're a little bit harder. The flip side of that is, and no pun intended, that when you do get them up on two wheels, you don't have much room before they do tip over. Quattrovello again comes in with a 10 because it's got four wheels and it tends to skid through corners rather than tip. The Milan SL, the GT, the Alpha, and these are also very low to the ground. And so they have a very low center of gravity, so they're very difficult to tip. I've had my Milan up once on two wheels, and it was completely and totally by accident, and it surprised the heck out of me, but I managed to pull it back down and not roll it. My opinion is that's one you don't really want to try that stunt home. The Alpha 7 is a little bit wider track than the DF, even though they're have a little shared heritage there. And a lot of people think it's more stable. The Alpha 9, similar track, similar stability. The Mulsanne is a very high center of gravity. I had one of these, and I tell you what, I picked it up in the parking lot on two wheels a couple of times. So higher center of gravity, less weight in the bottom, bike's a little bit less stable. And the Snook, now, admittedly, I've only been ridden the Snook a little bit, but my opinion is it wasn't very tippy. I kind of put it somewhere between the DF and the Alpha, maybe a little less. When I get mine in and I can push it real hard, I'll be able to maybe revise that. But right now, I'd put it above average of all the Velomobiles, and pretty stable from what I can tell so far. Maintainability, that's really a question gets asked an awful lot. People always say, how hard is my Velomobile to maintain? Can a bike shop maintain it? There's a couple of ways of looking at it, and I tried to look at it in both ways. One is how many bicycle parts are in it. And that's kind of a running pun, but they're all bicycles, but some of them use very standard bicycle parts that you're going to have at a bike shop. Some of them have some amount of customization, some of them have a lot of customization, and some of them are just hard to get into. So we start out here at Quest. I ranked it fairly low because it's kind of hard to get into. It's kind of hard to work on. It has some non-standard parts in it. Same thing with Stratas. They're a little bit easier. The Mango is a little bit less easy than the Strata was because it's got that dual chain drivetrain. Easy for me to say. I think the DF and the DFXLs are very easy to work on. But number 1 or number 10, the highest ranked one here is the WA. The WA uses very standard bicycle parts. Every bike shop in the world can work on it. Once you take the nose and the tail off of it, you bring it into the shop and you say, look, guys, it's just a recumbent bike. And after you pick the bike mechanic up off the floor, pat him on the shoulder, dust him off because he freaked out because of what you brought in the door, he can actually work on the thing. Quattrovellos, I go back and forth on this one. I ranked it a little low. The Quattrovello basic maintenance is very easy. Everything's accessible. Everything's very easy to work on. You can get to the drivetrain by and large. There's been some modifications to the shell that Velomobile NL has put out that helps you get access to things. But I've worked on a lot of these, and every one of them that comes to my shop has some major issue, and I've got to take things apart, and they take a long time. And so I ranked it low, not necessarily because of the normal maintenance, but because of when you have to do major surgery on it. Something's really broken, the derailleur's tangled up inside the thing or something like that. It takes you a while to deal with it. Taking that back, the back rear assembly out takes a couple hours. And if you don't have all the right tools, aligning all the little cushions on the axle take time. So those are things that just make life a little bit more difficult. Same thing happened when we looked at the Milan, the SL, and the GT. Basic maintenance, no problem. But when you have to do things, there's a lot of stuff you got to do. There's pictures of myself. There's pictures of my shop guys and other people with their tails sticking out at the top of the Milan because that's the only way you can get in and do some work in the front. Alpha 7s, the cover comes off quick. No problem, but getting the things became difficult. And there's some bunch of non-standard parts in here, stuff that's not on any other Velomobile out there. So that's where things got a little difficult, and I ranked it down. Same thing with the Mulsanne. Mulsanne isn't that hard to work on. The problem I had with the Masan was when I had to get to the rear mech, you had to flip the bike over and dig from the top down, and then things didn't work, and then you had to pick it up, and it was just a lot more work than I would have expected. When you look at stuff like the DF and the WA and the Quattrovello, there was more work to this thing than meets the eye. It was more like a Quest in how you had to deal with it. A little bit easier on the front derailleur, but still a lot of stuff you had to dig around and do, and sometimes you kind of needed that third and fourth joint in your arm to reach something. The work we did with the Snook basically works like all the other Velomobile products, pretty easy to get access to stuff, and not very difficult to maintain things that were going on in it. The manhole ability, this is the one people talk about all the time. They're talking about to me all the time. How hard is it to get in? And that's interesting because, the Velomobiles that have larger manholes, and that's the part where the body goes in, sometimes aren't the easiest to get in. So let's start over here. You look at the Quest and the Strata and the Mango. These are kind of all basically the same body because they were built all around the same time. The DF and DFXL got to be a little bit more work to get in and out of them. The WA has a bigger manhole. The big thing flips up, but it's a lower center of gravity, so you got a bigger step to get into. Quattrovello is kind of the same way. It's really easy to open up the top, stand on the seat, and get into the thing, but then you got to scrunch down and you got to work your way through. But you work your way down, and then when you get out, you got to rustle your way back out. Not the easiest thing to get it out of. But all of these bikes up here, by and large, you work out your biceps as much as your quads, so you're getting in and out of the things. The Milan SL and GT have giant manholes. They're real big step to get in them, but not as much. They're not as much manhole to try to work yourself around. But the lip where they connect at the top is more narrow. So you got to kind of, at least somebody who's my size, you got to kind of do the little jig with your tail and work it back and forth and get yourself inside the thing and before you can close the thing. Not a big deal, but kind of ranks it down a little bit. Alpha 7 and Alpha 9 works very similar to each other. Same thing as the DF. A little bit bigger manhole than the DF, so I gave them a little bit higher ranking. But by and large, you're still going a fairly small circle to get yourself into. The Mulsanne is interesting. A lot of people ask me about that one because, it's got we jokingly call it's got a pop top. You lift the thing up and you can, well, yes and no. So yeah, you can lift the thing up and it's pretty easy to see the seat and all that stuff, but it's got this big center ridge line where everything is that you got to step over. So for somebody who has some kind of hip movement issue, which is some of the codes that ask this, I don't usually, I usually say, you're going to have to try this thing because stepping into this box, even though the top's big and the manhole's more larger than anything else out there, you've got this weird side step kind of thing you got to do. You got to step in and then step over and then step through the hole where your foot goes and then sit down. So some people, it's great, no problem. Some people, that's a lot of hip movement and maybe not so good for them. So you're going to look at that. And then the Snook, I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 200 and some odd pounds and I'm 6 foot and my quads and my are huge. And I managed to get in a Snook, but let me tell you, it was kind of the watermelon and the pea for a few seconds to figure out how to get in there. Once I got in, I was fine. Getting in and out of it, that's a tiny bike. I'm a big guy. If you're not that as big as I am, it's probably a little easier. But in my opinion, that was one of the harder ones to get in and out of. I put it ranked similar to a Quest because I have trouble getting in and out of Quest with having to fight it in there. Not necessarily because it's small, because it's not as small, but because the Quest angle of attack, where you get in there, you just, have to maneuver your body around those ridges and things. Speed. Everybody wants to know, how fast is it? And, it's always a question, how fast can I go on the bike? And then the answer is always the same. How fast can you pedal the bike? But, everybody wants to know about speed because that's what Velomobiles are known for. So let's talk about flatland speed. I kind of ranked them in this order. The Quest and the Quest is pretty fast for as old as it is out there as a design. It's still pretty quick. I can move one down the road pretty fast. The Strata and the Mango were never really meant to be speed machines, and they're not. They're not that fast comparatively. The DF and the DFXL, those are fast. I still ride the DF more than anything else out there, and it's still fast. The walls are not shabby if they're configured right. They're pretty quick too. Quattro Velos kind of fall into that same category, a little faster than the Quest in my opinion, but they're a big bike with a lot of capacity, and it's not as aerodynamic. But there is no doubt in anybody's mind, certainly not mine, that Milan SL is the fastest bike on flatland speed that we know of today. Fastest velomobile. They're quick. Multiple people have done sub 3 hour centuries on them. If I could ever find a long flat piece of road, I'm pretty sure I could knock one out because I can get well under 4 hours in rolling hill area where I'm at. So if we, certainly people are already knocking out sub 3 hour 100 miles. Dave Lewis and Greg and Cantori and others have done this. I've put in on my Milan SL, I've put in 310, 315 in rolling hill territory that I'm in. So it's very easy to do it. You push 150, 160 watts, you're going to be moving along the road about 25 miles an hour. That's fast. The GT is not much slower than that. So it's just a little wider, a little bit more frontal area, a little wider. Alpha 7, Alpha 9 are pretty fast too. I've been going back and forth whether the DF or the Alpha 7 are faster. That's a constant debate. I've kind of decided the DF is faster, just based on my experience in my kind of world. There are people that will argue that the Alpha 7 is faster, and then the Alpha 9 is faster. Man, I think this is a potato thing. It kind of depends on what you're doing. They're very close to each other once they're optimized. The Mulsanne, I would not consider that a speed machine. It's a huge frontal area, probably 20 to 30% larger than any of the other velomobiles out there. It's there. You're pushing a lot of wind against the shell, so it's not nearly the fastest of any of them out there. And then the Snook, what I can tell so far from the time I've had on the Snook, they're very fast. Is it going to be faster than the Milan? My testing so far says it's not, but that's testing of a couple of rides. I have not put the kind of time in a Snook that I have in a Milan. It certainly hasn't had the optimization that I've had in a Milan. So I would not be surprised that once I've got more hours in a Snook that I reach and maybe even exceed my Milan SL time. And to give you the example here, this is a DF. Being one of my tricks, you can see this on my video. But right here, it's 25 miles an hour. It's a flat road, and I'm pushing about 160 watts. You can look at any of my videos that are out there with me pushing the bike. You can see the bike I'm using. You can see the video. You can see this grade. You can see every single bit of information out there, and you pretty much can figure out what's going on. On my DF, at roughly 170, 180 watts, I'm pushing 25 miles an hour. On my Milan SL at the same rate, I'm going to push 30. So right there kind of gives you the difference between those two bikes. Go back to this chart. And the last kind of thing I want to end with on this is they are all fast. The difference between the lowest one here, which is the Strata, and the highest one here, which is the Milan SL, is not that much. Maybe a few miles per hour at 200 watts. Now, when you hear that, it's hard to relate unless you're running with a power meter and you understand your own wattage. And this is the conversation I have a lot, and kind of how I'm going to end with this. When you look at your flat earth speed in what you're riding today, if you're riding about 15 miles an hour on a bicycle or a tricycle, that's the point, 15 miles an hour roughly, that the Velomobile will start to improve your forward momentum. The more faster you're going, 17, 18, 19 miles an hour, the more the Velomobile is going to help you because of the coefficient of the drag coefficient. That's not to say that you're going to jump in a bike, jump in one of these things, or Milan SL or a DF or any of these other things, and be able to sit yourself at a 25 to 30 mile an hour average. That takes training. And if you're not used to the bike and you're not used to the training and you're not used to pushing those kind of watts, you're not going to go that fast. And I've had a number of customers say, hey, Doug, I bought this, whatever it was, and I'm not nearly as fast as so-and-so. I've seen their videos. I've seen this. Well, let me tell you, my own experience on the videos, when I put a video out there, unless it's one of these races where I show you all 4 hours of it, if I'm showing you something out there, that's a road or an area or a segment that I know very well, that I've trained on, And I've done it in particular to show you something on the video. And so I had somebody talk to me a couple of weeks ago and say, "Hey, I saw your video. You were out here and I went there. You were doing 30 miles an hour on your video and I was only able to do 18. What gives?" Well, what gives was I'm trained for that. The wind was in the right position, and I had run that thing 3 or 4 times, figured out where all the potholes are, where all the line was, and had a much more optimized direction down the road than somebody who just randomly went out and grabbed that road. So be careful when you look at people's videos online, not just mine, but anybody's videos, when they're looking at these kind of speeds and go, "Well, I'm just as tall as that guy. I should be able to go just as fast." Maybe. Train with wattage, get your numbers up there, look at statistics from guys that publish them, not just their speed, their wattage, their cadence, all this other kind of stuff that matters. And that's really kind of what I wanted to end with here is these are fast. They're all very quick together as a group, but almost all of this depends on you and your fitness level and how many miles you ride to maintain that fitness level. Probably the last thing I would say is I put 200-300 miles a week in pretty religiously to maintain my fitness level. If you're not doing that, unless you have some genetic advantage, you're not going to get those same kind of numbers. And the same guys that we talk to that set records, that do other things, they push more miles than I do. And it's simple math now. It's how much you put in is how much you get out. And that's all I got to tell you about how to choose a Velomobile.